I am going to make as much information available as I can, consistent with the rules and regulations. My goal will be to provide as much transparency as I can, consistent with the law.
Well, he actually lied there.
It's not true.
He lied because he retched the words of the Mueller report from their proper context, misled the American people, often chopping up sentences in half to try to make things look so much better for Donald Trump than they actually were. Then he held a press conference the next morning, once again misrepresenting the findings of the report.
This is the Attorney General.
He went to Capitol Hill and lied under oath. The senator didn't want to say that. Let me just say, Mika, again, let's be really clear here. When he was in Congress, he was asked by Congress, Charlie Crist, whether he had knowledge of the special counsel's office being, quote, frustrated that his letter did not adequately portray the report's findings. And William Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, said he had no information to that effect, when, in fact, Mika, 2 weeks earlier,
right?
My God, that is exactly what he was told in a letter written to him by Robert Mueller, the special counsel himself.
And then his comments that we opened with was William Barr back in January, telling Congress that he is committed to transparency. Apparently, Bob Mueller isn't so sure about that.
Well,
Welcome back.
And we all know that's not the case because he held Mueller's letter.
Oh, no.
Held Mueller's letter in a file in his drawer for over a month.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, May 1st. With Joe, Willie, and me, we have MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, national security expert, columnist at USA Today, and author of the book, The Death of Expertise, Tom Nichols, political reporter.
Again, I'm expecting the Zeppelin song there.
Yes, political reporter for the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff, former U.S. attorney and former aide to Robert Mueller, now an NBC News law enforcement analyst, Chuck Rosenberg, and political reporter for the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst, Robert Costa. He is the moderator of Washington Week on PBS.
So Willie, sometimes, Willie, you tweet something that has unintended consequences. Yesterday, Mika tweeted out, "It's worse than we thought." It's worse than I thought.
Yeah.
And there were some great answers. Some people saying me at the end of the night when I'm looking at my bar tab.
I assumed it was you, yeah.
The best, though, was from Ben Howe, who said, "Hey, you're the one who married him."
That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about the Mueller report news.
She opened herself up to that, though, didn't she?
Yeah,
she did. So, Willie, let me ask you, what was your take of Senator Murphy, who we like very much? What was your take last hour of him refusing to state the obvious, that William Barr had misled and lied Charlie Crist and the American people on the question of whether he had heard that there was any frustration from the special counsel's office that the report had been mischaracterized?
I don't know. I mean, Senator Murphy's always been pretty straight with us. We have him on the show a lot. I'm not sure what he was looking at there, or he was sort of parsing through some of the legal language that I guess he couldn't say. But I mean, to us, as you look at it, it's pretty cut and dried. He testified that he didn't know what Robert Mueller thought about his 4-page summary, and now we know this morning that on March 27th, which was 14 days before that testimony, William Barr received a letter from Robert Mueller raising his objections to the presentation made by the Attorney General. So pretty clear cut from where we're sitting.
Yeah, let me just say, at least when I was practicing law in Northwest Florida, if you had lied like that to the federal judges, you'd be in jail.
Yeah.
You just would. You know, I know everybody is talking about the legal niceties of perjury. I'm telling you, at least maybe it was back in the old days, but there's not a federal judge in Northwest Florida that wouldn't put you in jail.
Right.
If you lied to them in their courtroom the way William Barr lied to the United States
Well, and there's so
Congress.
much more here. Democratic lawmakers are calling for special counsel Robert Mueller to testify after the Washington Post broke the news on communications between him and Attorney General William Barr, in which Mueller complained that Barr's 4-page memo, drafted in the span of about 48 hours, was twisting the public's perception of his findings. According to a copy of the letter reviewed by the Washington Post, Mueller said, quote, "The summary letter the department sent to Congress and released to the public late in the afternoon of March 24th did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work and conclusions. There is now public confusion about critical aspects of the results of our investigation. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the department appointed the special counsel, to assure full public confidence in the outcome of the investigations." Justice Department officials told the Post that the letter made a key request, that Barr release the 448-page report's introductions and executive summaries, and made some initial suggested redactions for doing so. Mueller wrote that the redaction process need not delay the release of enclosed materials. Release at this time would alleviate the misunderstandings that have arisen and would answer congressional and public questions about the nature and the outcome of our investigation. Wow. Mueller's letter was sent on March 27th. That's the same week as Barr's summary. And a day after the letter was sent, Barr and Mueller spoke by phone, just to make things a little bit more clear, for about 15 minutes, in which the Post reports Mueller expressed his concern. Yet, in testimony to the House and Senate, the Attorney General said he was unaware of Mueller's objections.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't. I suspect that they probably wanted, more put out.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
I mean,
Wow.
it's pretty shocking. So Robert Costa, you broke the news yesterday, and it is incredible. The line that I keep going back to is a line where Mueller tells Barr that the incompleteness, the mischaracterizations in his report sowed confusion and, quote, threatens to undermine a central purpose of the Justice Department appointing the special counsel. I take it from your reporting that was a feeling, a widespread feeling throughout the special counsel's office?
My colleagues at the Post, Devlin Barrett and Matt Zapotowski, broke the story, but if you read the report that they put out last night and you read the Post subsequent reporting, it becomes clear that many people within the Robert Mueller orbit were growing increasingly frustrated in communicating that to Mr. Mueller, who had his own concerns that he articulated in that letter. And talking to Adam Schiff, the House Intelligence Committee chairman yesterday, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and other top Democrats, there's an immediate desire to get Robert Mueller to come testify publicly, to have him come to Capitol Hill before House Judiciary, Senate Judiciary, House Intel, Senate Intel, and tell his version of how this all played out. Not only the report, but the handling of the report. And also from Senator Blumenthal and some of my top Democratic sources who are staffers, there's beginning to be a clamor, private for now mostly, should the Attorney General be part of any kind of discussion with regard to impeachment. It's not reached a threshold yet where the leadership is talking about it, but certainly rank and file Democrats are having those conversations behind the scenes.
Chuck, in some ways it's not surprising that Bob Mueller had sent a letter to William Barr, because we did have those reports, as referenced by Senator Chris there from the Washington Post and the New York Times, that other members of the special counsel team had complaints about the presentation made in the 4-page summary by Attorney General Barr. But as you see the details of what Robert Mueller was actually complaining about to Barr. What's your takeaway?
Well, it's not surprising in some ways, and it is in others, Willie. Let me explain. It's not often in the Department of Justice that we go to paper, that we commit in writing our disagreements or our disappointments, particularly with our boss, right? And so only when you really feel that there has been sort of a misdeed or a misdirection, would you go to paper. So the fact that Bob Mueller wrote a letter, right, which he must have known would become public someday, to the sitting Attorney General, to his boss, Mueller's a subordinate, is kind of remarkable to me. When we have disagreements, and that happens all the time, how do you typically resolve them? You pick up the phone and you make a call. And maybe Mueller thought that would not be sufficient here, that he had to make a record for history.
You know, Chuck, I'm glad to hear you say that. Last night, Mika and I were talking as this news was breaking. And again, I found it extraordinary that he had reduced his concerns to writing and was telling Mika that that's, as a practicing lawyer, whether you're in criminal or civil, that's something that you learn to do. You sometimes write letters for the file. You sometimes write letters knowing that in writing that letter, you are actually leaving the person who is the recipient of the letter no choice to respond, because you've just opened them up to claims of negligence if they don't make corrective actions.
But he just run it over.
But in this case, as you said, for Robert Mueller to write a letter to a guy who's been a friend for a very long time, whose wives are friends, who, as you said, is his supervisor, for those that said Robert Mueller did not do enough to complain, in this world, is that not an extraordinary action for him to take, where he put it there? And as I often said in Congress to my staff members, when you write a certain type of letter and put it on somebody's desk, it is a ticking time bomb that they must respond to. Is that not the effect of this letter?
Yeah, it is extraordinary, Joe, and I think your reaction is spot on. Look, the way we were brought up in the Department of Justice culture is that we're one family, and you don't want to put other members of the family in a box. And so you try very hard to work things out in a reasonable way, and often face-to-face or over the phone. When things get bad, and apparently they did, you put it in writing. And so it does land, with a thud on Bill Barr's desk, and he has to respond, perhaps not in writing, but maybe today when he testifies. So it's a very unusual turn of events, and I don't believe for a minute, having worked for Bob Mueller, that this is something that he would have done lightly.
Chuck, would you agree that Volume 2 of the Mueller report lays out at least 10 pretty good examples of potential obstruction of justice?
Yes, although I take one word out, potential.
Okay.
It is an extraordinarily compelling volume. Those 10 episodes of obstruction are in and of themselves deeply disturbing. I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, Mike, and I've brought cases in federal court and obtained convictions on just a fraction of the evidence that Mueller details.
Would you agree that in Volume 2, again, that the Mueller report indicates quite strongly and clearly that the reason they can't go forward with an indictment of the President of the United States is because of Justice Department policy?
Yeah, 100%. So the policy is that you can't charge a sitting president. The rationale is that doing so would stigmatize the president and burden the presidency. If you adhere to that rationale, then neither can you charge a sitting president, because that too would stigmatize the presidency and burden the president.
So given that assessment from you, would you agree with the supposition that based upon what Bill Barr has said publicly, that both he and the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Rod Rosenstein, have at a minimum trimmed the truth?
Yeah, Joe used two verbs before, misled and lied, and they're different, right? I mean, everybody who lies misleads, but not everyone who misleads lies. And I don't know where on that spectrum this stuff fits, but the Attorney General is better than that. He should neither mislead nor lie. He should adhere to the spirit of this and not to the letter of this. And that's what bothers me. We need more from our public leaders. We need more from the Department of Justice, and that's painful.
So, Joe, and to what Chuck just said, misleading, lying, where is it in between?
Right.
What is clear is that this letter was received, this phone call happened, and there was a difference in opinion as to what was released to the American public and told to Congress. And I think the intention and the fact that this was purposeful on the part of the Attorney General is very clear.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I am not in law school right now, because I am sure that people are going to be given assignments, given the Attorney General's statement before the Senate when he's testifying to Chris Van Hollen, and then, of course, the statement, the Charlie Crist statement, and then they're going to be asked to determine whether it's perjury or not. Actually, every day. I'm glad I'm not in law school anymore. But Chuck does bring up a good point. There is a spectrum there between misleading and lying, and then perjury. I've got to say, though, you look, Tom Nichols, at the question Charlie Crist asked in the House of Representatives of the Attorney General. And it was, let me grab it here again, it was the special counsel's office, quote, frustrated that his letter did not adequately portray the report's findings. And the answer to that was clearly yes. Now, we can debate where that falls on the spectrum, but I think most federal judges I've worked before would call that lying and perhaps perjury. But at the very least, this is an abuse of his office, abuse of power as Attorney General, that he held that letter for over a month while he was claiming to members of Congress in sworn testimony that there was no concern from Robert Mueller or his special counsel's office. And here we have, again, our former party, the Republican Party, last night coming out quickly and defending this Attorney General and his lies.
Which should tell you how desperate they think things have gotten. That William Barr would do this. During this past 24 hours, the thing I keep coming back to is the moment in William Barr's confirmation where he says, hey, I'm 68, I don't really need this job, what that really meant was, what it really meant was, I don't care about my reputation. I have to do this one last service to save what's left of the Republican Party and to save this administration. And Republicans are going along with that. It's like the last few hours on the Titanic, where if they have to push the children out of the way and dress like women to get in the lifeboats, that's what they're going to do. And, if that's what it takes, and that's what they need to survive, because Barr knows he's not going to be impeached. At worst, he's going to have to go through some grilling in Congress. The public has more or less made up its mind. I think the one thing Barr did that was very savvy is that he said, look, I'm going to put this story out. I'm going to put the top line out. I know that the president's followers are going to believe it, and everybody else, well, I'm 68, I don't need the job. And I think it really has reduced public service to just kind of doing this sort of service for your dawn at the last minute. To kind of save yourself. And I mean, it's really disturbing, and it's really bad for our democracy.
It's incredibly disturbing. This is the Attorney General of the United States of America. Well, I have been wondering for months what is going on with him. Something doesn't seem right. And now we see it laid out and in black and white. And to frame something really important that you said, Joe, Robert Mueller put it to paper. He made it clear that there is something wrong going on here. And the Attorney General, I'm not sure what his state of mind is or health or anything at this point, but I think he understands what it means to get a letter like that, and yet still he continued to mislead the American people.
I just say really quickly, Mika, this is, again, he is doing no service to his Don. He is not helping the president politically. He oversold what he had. It blew up in his face when the report came out. Donald Trump's poll numbers have fallen at least 3 or 4 points, the lowest ever in the Morning Consult poll. And you're going to see his numbers again fall, or at least stay low, because once again, the American people are finding out that, once again, the President of the United States and the Attorney General are corrupt. What did Donald Trump always talk about in 2016? The system was rigged. Now Donald Trump is the ultimate insider, and he has hired a hatchet man as his Attorney General to rig the system. No one has rigged the system like this since Richard Nixon. And that's bad for our constitutional republic. But for Donald Trump, more importantly for Donald Trump, it's bad for his political fortunes.
Well aware of the political consequences of that. And that's why I'm marveling at the stupidity here, and I question what is going on with him. Betsy Woodruff, let's go to you in terms of now this, moves into Congress. I believe Barr testifies before the Senate today, but there are a lot of questions heading his way. What's happening next in Congress?
That's right. I've reviewed the statement that Barr is going to be reading at the beginning of his testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning. And there's a line in there that is going to raise a lot of eyebrows. In the statement, Barr tries to explain why he didn't take Mueller's advice and release portions of the report so that people could have a better understanding of what Mueller was doing. And the explanation that Barr gives for withholding the report and for only having his 4-page letter be out there for weeks until the full report was released was that he didn't want there to be public debate based on incomplete information. Of course, the immediate pushback that's been quite vociferous to that is this idea that we've been debating the Mueller report based on incomplete information for the last 2 years. It's been one of the biggest stories in the country. That hasn't kept anybody from talking about it. For Barr suddenly to become circumspect and cautious about, oh no, what if people talk based on incomplete information, shows this weird departure from the way the entire conversation about the Mueller investigation has moved forward.
So, Chuck, we've made clear, I think, over the last hour and a half, our interpretation of what happened in Mueller's, the way that Barr conducted himself, especially now in light of this letter from Bob Mueller. But defenders of President Trump might say the Attorney General put out the full report with limited redactions, only, grand jury testimony and classified information for the public to see, that it's all out in the open. And so while his 4-page summary may have been incomplete, may have been confusing, he may have been concealing some of the truth on the obstruction question, the information is out there for the public to see.
It is, and that's a fair point with a huge but. The false narrative had a head start.
Right.
And so, and not just minutes and not just days, but weeks and weeks. And so everybody would have to read 448 pages carefully and understand it and its implications to understand that the false narrative is, 3 blocks away now. And the truth is not going to catch it. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, and Bob Costa, I guess that's the question. The purpose of the false narrative, was it just to make sure that the headline wasn't that there were 10 examples of possible obstruction of justice, that Barr wanted to give Donald Trump at least a 1-month head start to rally Republicans around him so there would never be a threat of impeachment? Any word about why Barr has been behaving this way and why he continues to behave this way?
In recent days, and again in the past 24 hours, I've spoken with longtime friends of Bill Barr, the Attorney General, his associates, and when Mr. Rosenberg talks about the culture at the Department of Justice, it's clear talking to associates of Barr, he sees a different kind of culture. People tell me, who know him well, that he believes that a special counsel, even going back to his days working for Bush 41, is always subordinate to the Attorney General, that he runs the Department of Justice, and that Robert Mueller or whoever serves as a special counsel may have their own assertions or opinions, but he is in control of the process. That word control often told to me. And he also doesn't come out of the prosecutorial mindset of many people at the Department of Justice, even though he is a longtime friend of Robert Mueller. This is someone who came out of the CIA, was a China analyst, was someone who's been in private practice for years. And this is not someone who comes at this entire process with the same mentality as an Andrew Weissman or Robert Mueller or Chuck Rosenberg. He has just a different, more ideological, more just outside of the DOJ culture, so to speak.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.